My name is Jeffrey, and at 67 years old, I never thought my own daughter would throw me out of my house. After 40 years working at the local manufacturing plant, providing everything for Amanda, she screamed those words that still echo in my mind. "Get out, or I will call the cops." So I did. I left without argument. What she celebrated that night is freedom from her embarrassing factory worker father. I grieved as the death of our relationship. She had no idea I owned that house outright. Let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button while I explain how my own flesh and blood could treat me this way. It all started long before that fateful evening, back when my sweet Catherine was still alive. We were high school sweethearts who married young. I started at the manufacturing plant right after graduation while Catherine worked as a receptionist at the local dentist office. We saved every penny to buy our modest home in a nice neighborhood with good schools. We always dreamed of having children, but it took us nearly 10 years before Amanda came along. Catherine was 32, and I was 37 when our miracle baby was born. Those early years were the happiest of my life. Catherine was an amazing mother, and I worked hard to provide for my little family. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we had everything we needed. I still remember Amanda's infectious laughter when I would swing her around in the backyard after coming home from work. She used to tell her mother, "Daddy smells like metal," but she would say it with such joy, like it was the best smell in the world. Everything changed when Amanda was 8 years old. Catherine started feeling tired all the time. Then the headaches began. By the time doctors diagnosed her with brain cancer, it was already stage 4. She fought bravely for 6 months, but in the end, cancer took my beloved wife when she was just 40 years old. I was devastated, but knew I had to stay strong for Amanda. That little girl was my entire world, and I promised Catherine on her deathbed that I would make sure Amanda had every opportunity in life. I picked up extra shifts at the plant, working 60 to 70 hours most weeks. The overtime pay helped me save for Amanda's college fund, while also allowing me to pay for ballet lessons, summer camps, and all the other activities that kept her busy and happy. Those first few years after Catherine died were difficult but strengthened our bond. Every night, I would help Amanda with her homework. Then we would look at old family photos and share memories of her mother. On weekends, we had our special tradition of making pancakes shaped like animals. I might have been a rough factory worker with calloused hands, but I became surprisingly good at creating pancake rabbits and turtles that made my daughter smile. Amanda was an exceptionally bright child. By middle school, her teachers were suggesting she apply to Preston Academy, the prestigious private school in our area. The tuition was steep, nearly $15,000 a year, but I was determined to give her this opportunity. I took on a part-time job as a security guard on weekends and dipped into some of my retirement savings. Seeing her excitement when she received her acceptance letter made every sacrifice worthwhile. That was when things began to change between us. Preston Academy catered to the children of doctors, lawyers, business executives, and old money families. Amanda was suddenly surrounded by peers whose parents drove luxury cars and took international vacations. Our modest 3-bedroom house and my 10-year-old sedan started to become sources of embarrassment for her. I first noticed the change when she was 14. Amanda had made friends with a girl named Bethany, whose father was a surgeon. When I offered to pick them up from a school event, Amanda texted me to park around the corner so her friend wouldn't see our car. It stung a little, but I told myself it was just normal teenage behavior. As high school progressed, these small instances multiplied. Amanda stopped inviting friends over. When I would ask why, she would make excuses about everyone being too busy. Once, I overheard her on the phone telling someone that she couldn't host a study group because her house was being renovated. Our home was perfectly fine. Not fancy, but clean and comfortable. The same house she had once loved. Still, I held on to hope that this was just a phase. Teenagers often go through periods of being embarrassed by their parents, regardless of their profession or economic status. I believed that once Amanda matured, she would appreciate the values of hard work and sacrifice that I had tried to instill in her. I never confronted her about these small rejections. Instead, I focused on making sure she had everything she needed to succeed academically and socially, even if that meant I had to remain in the background of her increasingly sophisticated life. Amanda graduated from Preston Academy with honors, earning her a partial scholarship to Westridge University, an elite private college about 3 hours away. Even with the scholarship, the remaining tuition and expenses were substantial, approximately $30,000 per year. I had saved diligently for this moment, but it still meant liquidating most of my investments and taking out a small loan against the house that I paid back by working even more overtime. The day I drove Amanda to college was bittersweet. I was immensely proud of my daughter, the first in our family to attend university. But I also sensed that this physical distance would only widen the emotional gap that had been growing between us. As we unloaded her belongings in front of her dormitory, I noticed her scanning the area nervously, watching as other parents arrived in their BMWs and Mercedes. My trusty Ford pickup truck stood out like a sore thumb among the luxury vehicles. When another incoming freshman approached and asked what I did for a living, Amanda quickly interjected before I could answer, saying, "My dad works in industrial resource management." It wasn't exactly a lie, but the way she rephrased my job as a line supervisor at the manufacturing plant made it clear she was ashamed of the truth. I said nothing, just smiled and continued unloading boxes. During her freshman year, Amanda came home for Thanksgiving and Christmas, but by sophomore year, these visits became less frequent. She would call with excuses about study groups, internship applications, or campus events that supposedly prevented her from making the 3-hour drive. When she did visit, our conversations felt strained and superficial. She would talk about her classes and her new friends, all of whom seemed to come from privileged backgrounds, but she rarely asked about my life or work. One particularly painful moment occurred during her junior year spring break. Amanda surprisingly announced she would be coming home for a few days. I was ecstatic, deep cleaning the house and preparing all her favorite meals. Then, 2 days before her scheduled arrival, she called to say she had been invited to accompany her roommate's family to their beach house in Florida instead. The disappointment crushed me, but I told her to have fun and send pictures. It was around this time that Amanda began dating Jake Thornton, the son of a prominent real estate developer. From the few photos she shared and our brief video calls, Jake appeared to be the embodiment of privilege, complete with an expensive watch collection and the confident demeanor of someone who had never worried about money. Amanda spoke of him constantly, clearly enthralled not just by his charm but by his family's status and connections. When Amanda graduated with a degree in corporate law, I sat alone in the audience, surrounded by other families who cheered and took photos together. Amanda gave me a quick hug after the ceremony before rushing off to take pictures with Jake and their friends. She introduced me to Jake's parents, William and Patricia Thornton, with visible nervousness. Their handshakes were formal and cold, their smiles not reaching their eyes as they assessed my worn suit and unpolished shoes. The real surprise came a week after graduation, when Amanda called to announce she had accepted a position at Thornton, Blackwell & Associates, a prestigious law firm in our hometown, where Jake's uncle was a senior partner. Even more surprising was her request to move back home temporarily. "It would just be for a year or so, Dad," she explained. "The starting salary is great, but I want to save up for a down payment on a nice condo downtown. It makes financial sense." I was overjoyed at the prospect of having Amanda back home, naively hoping this might repair our relationship. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing her old room, buying new bedding, and even repainting the walls in the soft blue color she had always loved. Perhaps, I thought, living under the same roof again would remind her of the bond we once shared. Little did I know that her return would set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately shatter any remaining illusions I had about our father-daughter relationship. Amanda moved back home with 4 suitcases of designer clothes and an attitude that made it clear she considered this arrangement beneath her. From the moment she walked through the door, her expression telegraphed disappointment, as though she had forgotten how modest our home truly was. "The kitchen cabinets look so dated," she commented on her first evening back, "and this countertop pattern is straight out of the 90s. I smiled through the criticism, telling myself that she had simply grown accustomed to more upscale surroundings during her time at university. Over the next few weeks, I made several small improvements around the house, installing new cabinet handles, updating light fixtures, and even splurging on a fresh coat of exterior paint to brighten up the place. Amanda acknowledged these changes with minimal enthusiasm, always quick to point out what still needed upgrading. 1 month after her return, Amanda invited Jake over for dinner. I spent the entire day preparing a special meal, wanting to make a good impression. I made my late wife's famous pot roast recipe with rosemary roasted potatoes and her apple pie for dessert. I even bought a bottle of expensive wine that stretched my budget, hoping to impress my daughter's boyfriend. Jake arrived in a sleek sports car, dressed in casual clothes that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. His handshake was limp, his smile condescending. Throughout dinner, he spoke mainly to Amanda, directing questions to me only when they pertained to the house or neighborhood property values. When I mentioned my work at the manufacturing plant, Jake's interest visibly waned, and he skillfully steered the conversation back to his father's latest real estate development project. "You know, Jeffrey," he said, using my first name despite being 30 years my junior, "with the housing market as it is, you might consider selling this place. The land value alone in this neighborhood has tripled in the past decade." Amanda quickly jumped in before I could respond. "Dad's too attached to this house. Mom and all that," she said dismissively, as if my emotional connection to the home where we had raised her was some kind of character flaw. After that initial dinner, Jake became a frequent visitor. With each visit, his thinly veiled contempt for both me and my home grew more apparent. One Saturday afternoon, he arrived while I was doing yard work. I came inside to greet him, still wearing my work clothes and gardening gloves. "Dad," Amanda hissed, pulling me into the kitchen. "Couldn't you have cleaned up before Jake got here? You look like a gardener or something." "I am gardening, Amanda," I replied, confused by her reaction. "These are my gardening clothes." She shook her head in frustration. "Just please change before my other friends arrive. And maybe use the back door if you're going to be working outside. The living room is off limits today anyway. We're having a small get-together." That small get-together turned out to be a gathering of about 10 young professionals, all colleagues from Amanda's law firm. I changed clothes as requested and remained in my bedroom for most of the evening, only venturing out once to get a glass of water from the kitchen. As I passed the living room, I overheard snippets of conversation that made me freeze in my tracks. "I can't believe you're actually living here," a young woman was saying. "I would die if I had to move back in with my parents after Westridge." "It's temporary," Amanda assured her. "Just until I save enough for a place downtown. The commute is killing me, and this neighborhood is so provincial." Jake's voice chimed in next. "Not to mention the house itself is like a time capsule from the Reagan era." Their laughter cut through me like a knife. But what Amanda said next hurt far worse. "You guys have no idea. Yesterday, he was watching some ridiculous game show and laughing so loud I could hear him upstairs. It was mortifying. Sometimes I feel like I'm living with a child instead of a father." I quietly returned to my room, without getting the water, the thirst forgotten as I absorbed this new reality. My daughter, my Amanda, was deeply ashamed of me, not just of my profession or our home, but of who I was as a person. The casual cruelty of her words made it clear that the sweet little girl who once proudly introduced me to her teachers as my dad who builds important things was long gone. The situation continued to deteriorate over the next few months. Amanda established an increasing number of rules for my behavior when she had company. I wasn't to use the living room or dining room when her colleagues visited. I should avoid mentioning my job at the plant. I shouldn't park my truck in the driveway if she was hosting anything. Each new restriction was framed as a small, reasonable request, but collectively they sent a clear message. I was an embarrassment to be hidden away. One evening, after Amanda and Jake had gone out for dinner, I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by the photos of our family through the years. Catherine smiling from the frames, Amanda growing from a toddler to a young woman across a timeline of Christmas and birthday pictures. I wondered what my late wife would think of the young woman our daughter had become. Would she be as hurt as I was? Or would she have known how to prevent this gulf from forming in the first place? For the first time, I allowed myself to acknowledge the painful truth. In trying to give Amanda everything, I had somehow created a person who valued nothing, at least nothing that came from me. The factory job that had funded her education The overtime hours that paid for her extracurriculars, the modest home that had sheltered her, all were sources of shame rather than gratitude. I went to bed that night with a heavy heart, but also with the first stirrings of something new, a sense that perhaps my endless accommodation of Amanda's disrespect needed to change. The breaking point came on a Saturday evening in April, almost 8 months after Amanda had moved back home. She informed me that Jake's parents were coming over for dinner, as they had an important announcement to make. Amanda spent the entire day in a frenzy of preparation, cleaning every surface and rearranging furniture. She even went so far as to replace several of our family photos with generic art prints she had purchased. "Dad, please wear the navy blue suit we got for Cousin Tina's wedding," she instructed, "and the tie I left on your bed. Jake's parents are very particular." I complied with her requests, wanting the evening to go smoothly. The suit was uncomfortable and rarely worn, but I dutifully put it on and tried to tame my thinning hair. When I emerged from my bedroom, Amanda gave me a quick once-over and sighed. "It will have to do," she muttered, adjusting my tie. Her words stung, but I forced a smile. The Thorntons arrived precisely at 6:30, William in an impeccably tailored suit and Patricia draped in jewelry that probably cost more than my annual salary. They brought an expensive bottle of wine and cast critical glances around our living room as they entered. Amanda played the perfect hostess, laughing a little too loudly at their jokes and repeatedly mentioning her recent successes at the law firm. Throughout the appetizer course, which Amanda had catered from an upscale restaurant, the conversation revolved around the Thorntons' recent trip to Europe and Jake's promotion at his father's company. I sat quietly, feeling increasingly out of place in my own home. Whenever I attempted to join the conversation, Patricia would give a tight smile that never reached her eyes, and William would nod dismissively before steering the topic back to something I knew nothing about. As Amanda served the main course, Jake clinked his glass and stood up. "I have an announcement to make," he said, looking at Amanda with practiced affection. "Amanda Jean Thompson, from the moment I met you, I knew you were someone special." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Will you marry me?" Amanda gasped dramatically, though the lack of surprise in her eyes told me this had been rehearsed. Yes, of course," she exclaimed, allowing Jake to slip an ostentatious diamond ring onto her finger. William and Patricia applauded politely while I sat frozen, processing the fact that my only daughter had just gotten engaged without any prior discussion with me. Not even a courtesy heads up before the dinner. "Congratulations," I finally managed, raising my glass. No one seemed to notice the slight tremor in my hand. "We have a proposal as well," William announced after the initial excitement had settled. He looked directly at me, for perhaps the first time that evening. "Patricia and I would like to help the young couple get started properly. We're prepared to purchase a condominium in Lakeside Towers for Jake and Amanda as an engagement gift." Lakeside Towers was the most exclusive residential building downtown, where units started at 7 figures. The casual way William mentioned this extravagant gift made it clear he was accustomed to such grand gestures. "That's incredibly generous," I said sincerely, though a part of me felt diminished by my inability to offer anything comparable. "There's just one small issue," Patricia added, her voice syrupy sweet, yet somehow condescending. "The unit won't be ready for at least 3 months. Construction delays. You know how it is." Amanda frowned slightly. "But that's not a problem. Jake and I weren't planning to move in together until after the wedding anyway, which we're thinking will be next spring. Actually, dear," Patricia continued, "we thought perhaps you could move in with us until the condo is ready. Our guest house is sitting empty, and it would give us a chance to help with wedding planning." Before Amanda could respond, William turned to me. "And Jeffrey, we understand your situation. If you're concerned about being here alone, we know of several very nice retirement communities that have immediate openings. Some even offer assisted living options for when that becomes necessary." The implication was crystal clear. Not only was I not welcome in their vision of Amanda's new life, but they assumed I would need their charity to survive without her. They had somehow gotten the impression that I was living in Amanda's house, not the other way around. Amanda, rather than correcting this misunderstanding, smiled brightly. "Dad's been talking about downsizing anyway, haven't you, Dad? This house is really too big for just one person." I had never said any such thing. In fact, I had recently mentioned potentially converting her bedroom into a reading room once she moved out permanently. The betrayal of her lie hit me like a physical blow. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. I maintained a polite facade, while internally grappling with the realization that my daughter had completely rewritten our reality to fit the narrative she preferred, one where she wasn't the child of a factory worker living in his modest home, but rather a benevolent caretaker, allowing her aging father to stay with her temporarily. After the Thorntons left, promising to email Amanda some open house dates for the retirement communities, I finally found my voice. "Amanda, why did you let them think this is your house?" I asked quietly. She rolled her eyes, still floating on the high of her engagement. "Does it really matter, Dad? They were just trying to be helpful." "It matters to me," I insisted. "This is my house. I've owned it for almost 30 years. I paid off the mortgage 10 years ago." "Well, technically, yes, but you don't need all this space," she replied dismissively. "And Jake's parents are right. You're not getting any younger. Those communities have activities and people your own age." "I'm 67, not 97, I said, my patience wearing thin. "I'm not ready for a retirement home, and I certainly don't need the Thorntons to find one for me." Amanda's expression hardened. "God, you're being so difficult. Can't you just be happy for me? This is my big moment, and you're making it all about you." "I am happy for you," I insisted, "but I'm also concerned about how easily you lied about our situation." "I didn't lie," she snapped. "I just didn't correct a minor misunderstanding because it wasn't relevant to the conversation." "It's relevant to me," I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "This is my home, Amanda. I worked 60-hour weeks for decades to pay for it, along with your private school and college tuition." At the mention of money, Amanda's face flushed with anger. "Here we go again with the sacrifices. Every time we disagree about anything, you throw your financial support in my face." "Well, guess what, Dad? Nobody asked you to work at that factory your whole life. That was your choice." Her words hit me like a slap. "I made that choice for you, Amanda, so you could have opportunities I never had. And I'm supposed to what? Feel guilty forever? Spend my life thanking you for doing what parents are supposed to do?" Her voice had risen to a shout. "Maybe if you had gotten an education yourself, you could have provided for us without working yourself to death and complaining about it for the next 20 years. I stood in shocked silence, unable to believe the vitriol spewing from my daughter's mouth. Catherine and I had always taught her to respect others regardless of their education or profession. Somewhere along the way, those lessons had been completely forgotten. "I think you should apologize," I said finally, my voice low and controlled despite the hurt coursing through me. "Apologize?" She laughed incredulously. "For what? For telling the truth? You know what your problem is, Dad? You're jealous. You're jealous that I made something of myself while you spent your life on an assembly line." "That's enough," I said firmly. "You're being disrespectful in my house." "Your house?" she scoffed. "You mean this embarrassing, outdated museum to the 1980s that you refuse to update? The house that Jake's parents probably thought was a joke when they pulled up? That house?" "Yes, Amanda. My house," I replied, standing my ground. "The house where your mother and I raised you. The house that's provided you shelter your entire life, including these past 8 months rent-free while you've been saving for your condo." Amanda's face contorted with rage. "Get out," she hissed. "Excuse me?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Get out, or I'll call the cops," she screamed, her composure completely shattered. "I can't deal with you anymore. Just go." I stared at my daughter, this stranger wearing Amanda's face, and felt a profound sadness wash over me. Without another word, I picked up my wallet and keys from the side table and walked toward the door. As I stepped outside, I heard Amanda slam the door behind me, the force rattling the family photos on the hallway wall. In my truck, I sat motionless for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. Through the living room window, I could see Amanda already on her phone, presumably calling Jake to tell him about our fight. My own flesh and blood had just thrown me out of my own house, threatening to call the police if I didn't leave. As I finally started the engine and pulled away from the curb, a strange sense of clarity began to replace the initial shock and hurt. Perhaps this confrontation had been inevitable, the final breaking point in a relationship that had been deteriorating for years. And perhaps it was time for me to stop accepting disrespect in the name of fatherly love. I drove aimlessly for about an hour, the evening's events replaying in my mind like a bad movie. Eventually, I pulled into the parking lot of the Riverside Inn, a modest but clean hotel on the outskirts of town. I checked in for the night, the receptionist giving me a sympathetic look when I explained I needed a room on short notice. Once in the sterile hotel room, I sat on the edge of the bed and allowed myself to fully absorb what had happened. My own daughter had thrown me out of my house, the house that I owned outright, the house where every corner held memories of Catherine and our life together. The absurdity of the situation might have been comical if it hadn't been so painfully real. I thought back to the day we had finally paid off the mortgage, just 3 years after Catherine's death. I had made the final payment with money from a small life insurance policy she had through her employer. It seemed fitting somehow that even after she was gone, Catherine was still helping to secure our family's future. I had called Amanda, who was in her second year of high school at the time, to share the good news. "That's great, Dad," she had said, her tone distracted. "Listen, can I call you back? We're about to start dissecting frogs in biology." That had been the extent of her reaction to a milestone that represented 27 years of hard work and sacrifice. Looking back, perhaps I should have recognized it as an early warning sign of the values shift that would eventually lead to this night. Around 11 o'clock, I finally called Frank Simmons, my attorney and longtime friend. Frank and I had known each other since high school, and despite our different career paths, we had maintained our friendship through the decades. He had handled Catherine's will and helped me set up a trust for Amanda's education. "Jeffrey, everything okay?" Frank answered, concerned by the late hour of my call. "Not really," I admitted, then proceeded to explain the evening's events. Frank listened without interruption, only occasionally making sounds of disbelief or sympathy. "Let me get this straight," he said when I had finished. "Amanda threw you out of your own house, the house that you owned free and clear, where she's been living rent-free while working at a law firm and saving money." "That's about the size of it," I confirmed. "And these future in-laws think the house is hers, and they're suggesting you move to a retirement home." "Seems that way." Frank was silent for a moment. "What do you want to do, Jeff? You could go back tomorrow, assert your rights as the homeowner. Legally speaking, Amanda has absolutely no ground to stand on here." I considered this option, but quickly dismissed it. "No, I don't think that would solve anything. The relationship is too damaged for a simple legal argument to fix it." "Then what are you thinking?" Frank asked. I took a deep breath, the plan forming as I spoke. "I think it's time Amanda learned about consequences. Real-world consequences, not the kind I've been shielding her from all these years." The next morning, after a restless night in the hotel, I called Sarah Bridges, a real estate agent who had recently helped Frank sell his mother's house. I explained my situation and what I wanted to do. "I can have the house listed by the end of the week," Sarah assured me. "Given the location and the current market, I don't think we'll have any trouble selling quickly, even without major updates." "Thank you, Sarah. There's just one complication I should mention. My adult daughter is currently living there, and she doesn't yet know I'm planning to sell." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I see. Will that be a problem?" "It might be," I acknowledged, "but I'm working with my attorney to handle that aspect. I'd like to proceed with the listing regardless." After finishing the call with Sarah, I drove to Frank's office to formalize our plan. Frank had already drafted an eviction notice, though he seemed uncomfortable as he slid the document across his desk. "Are you sure about this, Jeff? It's pretty drastic." I nodded slowly. "I know it is, but Amanda needs to understand that actions have consequences. She can't treat people, especially family, the way she treated me last night and expect no repercussions." Frank nodded in understanding. "The law is certainly on your side here. She has no legal claim to the property, and as an adult non-tenant, you have every right to evict her with proper notice." As I signed the necessary paperwork, I felt a complex mix of emotions. There was sadness, certainly, at the breakdown of my relationship with my only child, but there was also a newfound sense of self-respect that had been missing for too long. For years, I had accepted Amanda's increasing disrespect, making excuses for her behavior, and blaming myself for not measuring up to her new standards. No more. Later that afternoon, I returned to the house while Amanda was at work to collect some clothing and personal items. The house felt different somehow, tainted by the ugly words that had been exchanged the night before. In the kitchen, I found evidence of a celebration, empty champagne bottles and dessert plates still in the sink. Apparently, Amanda had invited Jake over after our confrontation, perhaps to celebrate her newfound freedom from her embarrassing father. The thought of them toasting and laughing in my house after throwing me out sent a flash of anger through me, but I quickly tamped it down. Anger wouldn't help the situation. I needed to stay focused on the plan. I packed several suitcases with clothing, collected important documents from my home office, and carefully selected a few precious mementos, including photos of Catherine and baby Amanda that I couldn't bear to leave behind. The rest would stay for now, until the house sale was finalized. Before leaving, I walked through each room, taking photos to document the condition of the property for the listing. In Amanda's room, redecorated with expensive bedding and cosmetics scattered across the vanity, I noticed a framed photo I'd never seen before. It showed Amanda and Jake in front of the Eiffel Tower, both dressed in designer clothes and sporting identical carefree smiles. The trip must have happened during one of the holidays when Amanda had claimed she was too busy studying to come home. The discovery reinforced my resolve. My daughter had built her new life on lies and willful disregard for the person who had sacrificed everything to give her opportunities. It was time for her to face reality. That evening, I rented a small furnished apartment with a 6-month lease. It was nothing special, a 1-bedroom unit in a quiet complex across town, but it was clean and affordable. As I unpacked my suitcases in my temporary home, I watched the sunset through unfamiliar windows and felt an unexpected sense of liberation. For the first time in decades, I was living solely for myself, without shaping every decision around Amanda's needs and wants. I called Frank to let him know I was settled, and he confirmed that the eviction notice and property sale documents would be delivered to Amanda by a courier service the following afternoon. Everything was in motion now, a train that couldn't be stopped. I wondered how Amanda would react when she received the documents, when she realized that her actions had set in motion consequences she had never anticipated. From my apartment window, I could see families walking dogs and children playing in the complex's small playground. Normal, everyday life, continuing all around me while my own had been turned upside down. Yet somehow, despite everything, I felt more at peace than I had in years. The constant need to earn Amanda's approval, to make myself smaller and less visible to avoid her embarrassment, had been exhausting in ways I hadn't fully recognized until now. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. I would never again allow anyone, not even my own daughter, to make me feel ashamed of the life I had built through honest work and sacrifice. The legal documents were delivered to Amanda exactly 1 week after our confrontation. I had deliberately chosen to wait, allowing her to enjoy her perceived victory, to settle into the belief that she had successfully rid herself of her embarrassing factory worker father. Frank had arranged for the courier to arrive at 5:30 in the evening, ensuring Amanda would be home from work to receive the papers personally. I wasn't there to witness her reaction, of course, but I didn't have to wait long to learn of it. At 6:15, my phone began ringing incessantly, Amanda's name flashing on the screen with each call. I let them go to voicemail. Text messages followed in rapid succession. "Dad, what is this? Call me immediately. This has to be some kind of joke. You can't sell my house. Dad, please call me back. We need to talk about this. You're being completely unreasonable." The messages grew increasingly frantic as the evening progressed, culminating in a final text that simply read, "Fine. I'm calling Jake's father. He knows real estate law. This won't stand." I silenced my phone and tried to focus on the book I was reading, but concentration proved impossible. Despite my resolve, a part of me ached for my daughter. Another part recognized that this pain was necessary, a harsh but important lesson that should have been taught long ago. The next morning, Frank called to inform me that William Thornton had contacted him, demanding a meeting. He was quite condescending, Frank noted with a touch of amusement. Seemed shocked when I informed him that I've been practicing law since before he passed the bar exam. We agreed to meet at Frank's office that afternoon. I arrived early. My stomach knotted with anxiety, but my determination intact. Frank greeted me with a reassuring handshake. Remember, Jeff, you hold all the legal cards here. The house is solely in your name, and Amanda has no claim to it whatsoever. Stay calm, stick to the facts, and let me handle any legal posturing. At exactly 2 o'clock, Amanda arrived with both Jake and William Thornton in tow. She looked disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed and her usual polished appearance notably absent. Jake maintained his typical air of entitlement, while William carried himself with the confident authority of a man unaccustomed to losing negotiations. "Dad," Amanda began immediately, her voice wavering between anger and desperation. "What is this insanity? You can't just sell our house." "My house," I corrected gently. "As the legal documents clearly state, the property at 228 Maple Avenue is solely in my name. I've owned it for nearly 30 years. But that's our family home," she protested. "Yes, it was," I agreed, "until you decided I was no longer welcome there." William Thornton interjected, his tone patronizing. "Mr. Thompson, surely there's been some misunderstanding. Amanda was merely suggesting that at your age, a smaller, more manageable living arrangement might be beneficial." Frank cleared his throat. "Mr. Thornton, with all due respect, that's not accurate. According to my client, Miss Thompson explicitly ordered him to leave the premises and threatened to call law enforcement if he did not comply. Given that Mr. Thompson is the sole legal owner of the property, such behavior constitutes both a personal and legal affront." Amanda's face flushed. "He's twisting what happened. I was upset. We both said things we didn't mean. I meant what I said," I stated quietly. "And apparently, so did you. You made it clear that you were ashamed of me, ashamed of our home, and ashamed of everything I've worked for. Now you're facing the consequences of those words." "You can't be serious about selling," Amanda insisted, her voice cracking. "Where will I live?" The question was so self-centered, so completely void of concern for my welfare, that I almost laughed. "The same place you would have lived if the house were actually yours and you had thrown me out, I suppose. With Jake, with his parents, or in an apartment you can certainly afford with your lawyer's salary." William leaned forward, adopting his most authoritative posture. "Let's discuss this reasonably. The real estate market is quite volatile right now. Selling hastily could mean leaving significant money on the table. Perhaps we could reach an arrangement where Amanda purchases the house from you at a fair market value, with favorable terms." Frank shook his head. "I'm afraid the property has already been listed with Bridges Realty. In fact, we've already received several expressions of interest. My client is not interested in private sale arrangements at this time." Amanda's composure finally broke entirely. "Dad, please," she sobbed. "I'm sorry about what happened. I was stressed about the engagement and meeting Jake's parents' expectations. I didn't mean what I said." Looking at my daughter's tear-stained face, I felt a profound sadness. "Amanda, this isn't just about what happened last week. This is about years of increasing disrespect, of being treated like an embarrassment rather than a father who sacrificed everything for you. Last week was simply the final straw. Jake, who had remained uncharacteristically silent until now, finally spoke. "Sir, I understand you're upset, but surely there's a solution that doesn't involve such drastic measures. Amanda loves that house." "Does she?" I asked, genuinely curious, because all I've heard for months is how outdated it is, how embarrassing it is to have friends over, how she can't wait to move to a more prestigious address. Amanda winced at having her own words quoted back to her. "That's not fair," she whispered. "No. What's not fair is being treated with contempt by the person you've devoted your life to raising," I replied. "What's not fair is being thrown out of your own home for the crime of being a factory worker instead of a doctor or lawyer or business executive." Frank gently steered the conversation back to practicalities. "As the eviction notice states, Miss Thompson has 30 days to vacate the premises. Mr. Thompson has generously waived any claim to back rent for the 8 months she has been living in the property cost-free. The house is expected to sell quickly, and all proceeds will go to Mr. Thompson as the legal owner. William Thornton's expression had shifted from confident to concerned as the meeting progressed. Amanda never mentioned that the house belonged to her father, he said quietly, almost to himself. Didn't she? I asked. Interesting, considering she's been living there rent-free since graduation while saving for a down payment on a condo. Where exactly did you think she was living, Mr. Thornton? The implication hung in the air, uncomfortable and revealing. Amanda had clearly cultivated a very different narrative about her living situation, one that painted her as independent and financially established, rather than reliant on her factory worker father's generosity. As the meeting concluded, Amanda made one last desperate attempt. Dad, what about all Mom's things? Her china, her quilts, all the family photos. You're just going to sell everything? The mention of Catherine's possessions struck a nerve, but I remained steady. I've already removed the items of sentimental value that matter to me. You're welcome to collect any personal belongings and family heirlooms that you want to keep. Frank will arrange a time for you to do so, supervised, within the next week. Supervised? Amanda echoed incredulously. Like I'm some kind of criminal? Like you're someone who has demonstrated poor judgment and a lack of respect for other people's property, I corrected. As they rose to leave, the fight seemed to drain out of Amanda. She looked suddenly young and vulnerable, more like the little girl I remembered than the polished professional who had been treating me with disdain. Where are you staying? She asked quietly. I've found a place, I replied, not offering details. The hurt was still too raw to risk her showing up unannounced, attempting to emotionally manipulate me into changing my mind. In the days that followed, the fallout continued. Amanda called numerous times, alternating between tearful apologies and angry accusations. I maintained minimal contact, responding only to practical questions about retrieving her belongings from the house. Through Frank, I learned that the engagement had hit rocky ground. Jake's parents had been deeply disturbed by the revelations about Amanda's living situation and her misrepresentation of her financial independence. Their enthusiasm for welcoming her into their family had cooled considerably. 2 weeks after our meeting, Frank called with news that Amanda had been placed on administrative leave from the law firm. Apparently, her work performance has suffered dramatically, he explained. William Thornton may have pulled some strings initially to get her the position, but even nepotism has its limits. I felt no satisfaction at hearing of Amanda's professional troubles, only sadness that her carefully constructed facade was crumbling around her. She had built her new identity on shaky foundations, on rejection of her roots and misrepresentation of her circumstances. Now she was learning, painfully, that authenticity matters. The house sold in just 11 days, for significantly above the asking price. The new owners, a young couple with twin toddlers, fell in love with the family-friendly neighborhood and the solid construction of a home built in an era when things were made to last. They asked for a quick closing, which I happily accommodated. The day before the closing, I visited the house one last time. Amanda had removed her belongings, along with various family items I had agreed she could take. The rooms echoed with emptiness, yet they still held the ghosts of memories accumulated over 3 decades. In the kitchen, I could almost see Catherine stirring soup at the stove, singing softly to herself. In the living room, I remembered countless Christmas mornings, Amanda's excited squeals as she opened presents. As I stood in what had been Amanda's childhood bedroom, now stripped of all personality, I wondered where exactly things had gone so wrong. Had I indulged her too much? Had I failed to instill proper values? Or was this simply the natural outcome of a child's desire to escape her origins and reinvent herself? Whatever the cause, the result was undeniable. The daughter I had raised, the little girl who once looked at me with unquestioning love and admiration, had become a woman who saw me as an embarrassment to be hidden away. And now, she was learning the hardest lesson of all, that actions have consequences, that bridges burned cannot easily be rebuilt. 6 months passed. I settled into my new life in a comfortable condominium I purchased with the proceeds from the house sale. It was smaller than my old home, but modern and maintenance-free, with an association that handled the yard work and exterior upkeep. After decades of handling every repair and renovation myself, there was a certain freedom in simply calling a maintenance person when something needed attention. The remaining money from the house sale went into my retirement accounts, ensuring financial security for the rest of my life. I finally retired from the manufacturing plant, receiving a modest pension and the heartfelt well wishes of colleagues who had become friends over 40-plus years. At my retirement party, several younger workers shared stories of how I had mentored them, taught them skills that had advanced their careers, and stood up for them when management made unreasonable demands. Their words reminded me that while I might have failed in some ways as a father, I had succeeded in other areas of life. I developed new routines and interests. I joined a woodworking club at the local community center, putting the skills I had honed maintaining my old house to creative use. I volunteered at a literacy program, helping adults learn to read, and found unexpected fulfillment in seeing others achieve their goals. I even began dating again, cautiously, starting with occasional coffee meetings with Martha, a kind widowed librarian I met at a community event. Through Frank, I received periodic updates about Amanda. The engagement to Jake had been called off, apparently by mutual agreement, after Jake's father made it clear that the family's financial support would be significantly less forthcoming than originally indicated. She had eventually returned to work at the law firm, but in a demoted position with less prestige and lower pay. She had moved into a small apartment, learning to live within her means for perhaps the first time in her life. I had not spoken directly to Amanda since our meeting in Frank's office, though not for lack of effort on her part. She had called and texted regularly for the first few months, alternating between angry accusations and tearful pleas. I had responded politely but distantly, not yet ready to reopen that wound. Eventually, her attempts at contact became less frequent and then stopped altogether. Then, one Saturday morning in October, as I sat in my favorite corner of Riverside Cafe, enjoying the weekend paper, a familiar voice broke through my concentration. "Dad?" I looked up to find Amanda standing beside my table, a takeout coffee cup clutched in her hand. She looked different, simpler somehow. Her designer clothes had been replaced by jeans and a sweater, her elaborate hairstyle now a straightforward bob, her face bearing less makeup than I was accustomed to seeing. "Amanda," I acknowledged, surprising myself with the calmness in my voice. "How are you?" "I'm okay," she replied hesitantly. "May I sit for a minute?" I gestured to the empty chair across from me. An awkward silence stretched between us as she settled in, both of us searching for words to bridge the 6-month chasm. "I like your place," she finally said, glancing around the cafe. "Do you come here often?" "Most Saturday mornings," I replied. "They make a decent breakfast, and the coffee is good." Another silence, heavier this time. "Dad, I owe you an apology," Amanda blurted suddenly. "A real one. Not like before when I was just trying to get you to change your mind about the house." I set my paper aside, giving her my full attention. "I'm listening." She took a deep breath. "I treated you terribly. Not just that night when I told you to leave, but for years before that. I was ashamed of you, of your job, of our house, and that was completely wrong of me. You worked so hard to give me everything I needed, and I repaid you with disrespect and ingratitude." Her words were like a balm to wounds I hadn't realized were still so raw. Yet I remained cautious, aware that genuine change takes more than a single moment of clarity. "What brought about this realization?" I asked. Amanda's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Reality, I guess. After everything fell apart, I had to face who I really was, not who I was pretending to be. Without your support, without the security of the house, without Jake and his family's connections, I discovered I wasn't as independent or successful as I thought." She wiped at her eyes with a napkin. "The first few months were really hard. I had to learn to budget, to live without the safety net you'd always provided. I had to face the fact that many of my so-called friends disappeared once I couldn't keep up with their lifestyle. It was humbling and painful, but necessary." I nodded, understanding all too well the lessons that come from adversity. "And now I'm rebuilding, I guess. Taking responsibility for myself, truly this time." I've moved to a smaller apartment. I'm cooking at home instead of eating out. I'm focused on my work rather than office politics. She gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. I even started reading those financial management books you used to recommend, the ones I always ignored. That's good, Amanda. I'm genuinely glad to hear you're finding your way. She looked at me directly, her expression earnest. I've been thinking a lot about Mom, too, about what she would think of the person I became, the values she tried to teach me, about kindness and respect and appreciating what you have. The mention of Catherine sent a familiar pang through my heart. Your mother was the most authentic person I've ever known. She never pretended to be anything other than exactly who she was. I know, Amanda whispered, and I threw away that legacy to chase status and appearances. I'm so ashamed of that now. We sat in silence for a moment, both lost in memories of Catherine and the family we had once been. Dad, I don't expect you to forgive me right away, or maybe ever, Amanda continued. But I want you to know that I understand now what I did wrong, and I'm trying to be better, to be someone Mom would have been proud of, someone you could be proud of again someday. I studied my daughter's face, seeing in it echoes of the little girl she had been, and glimpses of the woman she was becoming. The anger and hurt that had consumed me for so long had gradually given way to something else, something quieter, but no less profound, a sadness tempered with hope. Amanda, forgiveness isn't something that happens all at once, I said carefully. It's a process, for both of us. I'm still working through my own feelings about everything that happened. She nodded, accepting this difficult truth. But I'm willing to start that process, I continued. Perhaps we could meet for coffee again next Saturday. Begin getting to know each other as the people we are now, not who we were then. The relief and gratitude in her expression was palpable. I'd like that very much. As we parted ways that morning, I felt lighter somehow, as if a burden I had been carrying had begun to shift. The road ahead would not be easy, the relationship not quickly or simply repaired, but there was a path forward now where before there had been only a wall. In the months that followed, Amanda and I slowly rebuilt our relationship from the ground up, this time on a foundation of mutual respect rather than dependence and obligation. We established clear boundaries and expectations, speaking honestly about our feelings and needs in a way we never had before. She met Martha and made a genuine effort to know her as a person rather than judging her based on appearance or status. I listened with interest as she shared her professional challenges and small triumphs, offering advice only when asked. The most profound lesson I learned through this painful journey was about the nature of love itself. For decades, I had confused unconditional love with unconditional acceptance of mistreatment. I had allowed Amanda to disrespect me because I believed that's what loving parents did. They endured anything for their children. Now I understood that true love, the kind that helps someone grow and become their best self, includes boundaries and consequences. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for someone is to let them face the results of their own actions, to experience the natural outcomes of their choices without rushing in to shield them. Amanda had needed that hard lesson, that moment of reckoning, to recognize the person she had become and find the motivation to change. For my part, I had needed to reclaim my self-respect, to remember that being a good father didn't mean being a doormat. I had worth and dignity apart from my role as Amanda's provider, worth that deserved acknowledgement and respect. As for Amanda, she continued her journey of growth and self-discovery. She found a new position at a smaller law firm where she could focus on helping clients rather than impressing colleagues. She developed authentic friendships based on shared interests rather than social climbing. She even began volunteering at a youth mentoring program, using her own experiences to help teenagers navigate the pressures of social status and authentic identity. Our relationship would never return to what it had been during her childhood, those simple days of unquestioning love and trust. But perhaps what was emerging was something ultimately more valuable, a relationship between two adults who chose to be in each other's lives, who had seen the worst in each other and decided to stay anyway. So, what would you do if faced with such a profound betrayal from someone you loved? Would you forgive immediately? Hold on to resentment forever? or find that middle path of boundaries and cautious rebuilding. The choices we make in these moments of crisis define not just our relationships with others, but our relationship with ourselves. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel for more reflections on family, forgiveness, and finding dignity in life's most challenging moments. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones that transform us the most.